I am more than chaos, more than shame. A soul still shining through the pain. I'm not the wreck they walked around. I'm standing here on solid ground. You can find your way back, even when you fall between the cracks. Between the cracks.
Hey out there, welcome Between the Cracks. I am Jen, and today I want to talk about something that has been on my mind since the executive order was signed on the 24th of July of this year. So I'm going to talk about something political. Hi, Christy. Hi, Indigo. Really glad that you're both here. I am going to talk about something political, but I want to make it very clear, as you can see by the ticker, that I am not taking a political stance on this because at the moment I don't see myself in either party. So I am looking at this as somebody who has been who's experienced homelessness, somebody who someone who advocates for homeless. I have worked for nonprofits that work with homeless families. And I want a big reminder. Well, I'm really happy that you got an alert today, Christy. That makes me happy to know that people are getting alerts. So I've been reading into this. I have a ton of windows open, and I'm going to make it clear right now that I am showing not only what I'm seeing as the negative, hi Crystal, the negative impacts of this executive order ending crime and disorder on America's streets, but I'm also showing what people are saying are the benefits. I'm embarrassed to say in the United States today, August 1st, 2025, that the pro pretty small because it's unrealistic, and I believe and think that not, irrefutably prove that it's not possible. But all of the research that I've done shows me that it's not possible to do what this executive order is asking to do, because the number one reason is this stuff. And when I say this stuff, I'm talking about people experiencing homelessness is a state issue. This is one of those things that the states regulate. And first, we're going to start with the actual executive order so that we understand what we're talking about, because one thing I do not believe in is discussing a topic I don't know anything about. So, this is a directive from the White House, presidential action, ending crime and disorder on America's streets, executive order, July 24th, 2025. By the authority vested in me as president by the Constitution and the laws of the United States of America, it is hereby ordered, Section 1, Purpose and Policy. Endemic vagrancy. Now, vagrancy, literally, the definition of vagrancy is to be homeless. Just so we're clear that if you look it up, look up the word vagrant or vagrancy, you will see that that's literally being unhoused. Okay, endemic vagrancy, disorderly behavior, sudden confrontations. I'm still trying to wrap my brain around that one. But I do believe that they mean confrontations with, say, panhandlers on the street. They may be aggressive, or people who are on drugs, and that causes them to be aggressive. And violent attacks have made our cities unsafe. And I'm going to stop interjecting into this. I just want to read through this as fast as I can and then get back to the rest of it. The number of individuals on the streets in the United States on a single night during the last year of the previous administration, 274,224 human beings, was the highest ever recorded. The overwhelming majority of these individuals are addicted to drugs, have a mental health condition, or both. Nearly 2/3 of homeless individuals report having regularly used hard drugs like methamphetamines, cocaine, or opioids in their lifetime. An equally large share of homeless individuals reported suffering from mental health conditions. The federal government and the states have spent tens of billions of dollars on failed programs that address homelessness, but not its root causes, leaving our other citizens vulnerable to public safety threats. We're going to discuss all of the things in this section shortly. I think actually we might just do this section by section. Shifting homeless individuals into long-term institutional settings for humane treatment through the appropriate use of civil commitment will restore public order. Surrendering our cities and citizens to disorder and fear is neither compassionate to the homeless nor other citizens. My administration will take a new approach focused on protecting public safety. Okay, so I just want to put that back here. Jamie. Hey. Okay, so I want to make something very clear. Institutionalizing people against their will is a state by state issue. 1. 2, how does the federal government plan to triage all of these people? Because the police officers in the cities across America are not equipped to do this. All they're really equipped of doing is arresting people. Hi, Incarnasoul. Hey, Mandy. Throwing someone's belongings away, and their if they have tents, or if they live in a car, a van, an RV, motorhome, trailer, getting rid of, taking those things away. Those are their homes. That's their life. This is how they live. And, I'm sure that a lot of people are aware of the uptick in van life and RV life in the last 10 to 15 years. Well, one of the reasons for that is, this is important. This order is grossly misrepresenting the origin and impact of addiction in this country, and that responsibility lies with the government itself. Indeed. So I'm not going all the way back to those types of things, but what I am going to step back in time to discuss is the Community Mental Health Act of 1963. Because this is where, so this is important too. I've never seen any aggression, violence towards homeless people more than being instigators. Now, we're also gonna, Christy, that you bring up a good point. Hang on. It is infuriating to me because most people who become unhoused or choose van life do because we can't afford homes or rent in this current day and age. The only reason I have my apartment is because of my parents. Help me. Yes. And this is all very true. I believe that one of the things that bothers me the most is this line of speaking that homeless people are a threat to citizens, and they're just gonna attack you. They're gonna come into your home. It's like the broad immigrant statements, right? Like, these people are gonna attack you because they're crazy and they're on drugs, and honestly, a large part of the homeless community is our Vietnam and since veterans. I do know a lot of groups that go out into encampments and work with our homeless vets to try to get them housed while there's still housing for them available. Unfortunately, a lot of the vets choose to stay in homelessness because the red tape and the bureaucracy is just, it's insurmountable. And I have said this before, and I will say it now because now is when it's the most important. I have never been through anything more difficult than dragging and clawing myself out of homelessness. And I had help. I had help of people who believed in me, who were working in these DV shelters, homeless shelters, homeless services, mental health services. These people, a community of people that assisted me in helping myself. But it is so incredibly difficult. I can't make you understand. I also, the 2/3 of the people, stated in the executive order that 2/3 of the people are criminals. Now, that's none of these facts are backed up with facts. What I can say is that there's more violence against homeless people than there is by homeless people against non-homeless people. And I know that the statistics on that do not appropriately show the numbers because most people that are homeless are too afraid to file a police report, because then they will more than likely in many major cities in the US be incarcerated, at least overnight. I myself was incarcerated for 36 hours for trespassing by sitting in the parking lot of a closed business on a Sunday morning. There was a disabled Vietnam veteran who was homeless panhandling in the middle of the day, stabbed to death. See, and passerbys did nothing, because we seem to have been programmed into believing that these are less than human. They're not, these people are not people like you and I. They're a problem. They're an issue. They're addicts. They're mentally unstable. They're crazy. Okay, sure. Did they all start that way? No, they did not. So, let's see what else we have here. Also, we need to create now I'm getting to the, affordable and accessible mental health care. Yes, if people had access to medications and therapy consistently and support to learn technology, they could change their life. And that is absolutely true. There are resources, very limited, and I want to make a deep point in people understanding that it's very difficult. I see Indigo brought up solid addresses, right? Bank account addresses, ID. There technically are services to assist homeless individuals with getting a state ID or a driver's license, getting a social security card, because more than likely they either never had one or have lost it, along the way. And as well as, mental health services. And let's get this right. So he was friendly and cheerful and taken from us over $25. Makes me think of my friend who's not homeless, but he was stolen from us for 42 cents. Actually, he was unalive for, what's up, Seventh? How you doing? Yeah. So the fact that you were able to maintain a car, well, thank you. It's every day for me, honestly, is still a struggle. Because the main issue for my being homeless has been settled. I left a very abusive man, but the other issues, my underlying issues from the troubled teen industry programs that I went to, and how it was never discussed and dealt with after I was released. And I mean, what everybody in the chat anyways knows, I'm only 2.5 years into even being awakened to the knowledge that I am a survivor of this. And what is really drawn my attention, aside from my personal experiences with being homeless, to this particular executive order is the 1 in 30 children in America who are homeless right now. And I can't find anything on the internet that discusses what happens to the kids. So good. It's good to know that you are passionate about the unhoused issue, and it makes you furious that our government is backtracking, to older thinking, way older thinking, because I'm going to use this to take us to our next point, which is we're going to look into the Deinstitutionalization Act of 1963, which was technically called the Community Mental Health Act of 1963, also known as the Mental Retardation Facilities and Community Mental Health Centers Construction Act of 1963. Please forgive me for reading that word out loud. That was 1963, and I did not read the whole thing ahead of time anyways. So this was a landmark piece of legislation that aimed to shift the focus of mental health care from large state-run institutions to community-based treatment centers. The act, signed by John F. Kennedy Jr., no, I'm kidding, John F. Kennedy, provided federal funding for the construction and an initial staffing of 1,500 community mental health centers nationwide. I'm curious, who knows why John F. Kennedy would be so interested in the deinstitutionalization of Americans? Could it be because his older sister was sent to an institution and was allowed to be a human test subject by their father and was one of the first to receive yes, thank you, his sister. She was made to be a guinea pig, if you will, for lobotomies, and it's a really sad story. I would highly recommend looking into The Other Kennedy Daughter, is the documentary and book, I believe. So the key provisions and goals was to shift to community-based care. Now, if you look back to 1963, none of us were alive then. So I can go by talking to my parents and other elders in the country who were young back then and understand that has anybody seen Girl Interrupted? It's another really good snapshot of 1970. I believe it was 1970 or 71. To show a snapshot of that time and how scary these state-run institutions were. So the fact that our government at the time of 1963 wanted to shift to community-based care, right? So the primary goal was to reduce the number of people residing in state mental hospitals by providing care closer to home within communities, which is very understandable. Community mental health centers, providing federal grants to states for the construction and initial operation of community mental health centers. 5 essential services. Each center was mandated to provide at least 5 core services: consultation and education, inpatient care, outpatient care, emergency response, and partial hospitalization. Reduced institutionalization, improved access to care. So this caused the deinstitutionalization movement. It was like the major catalyst for the movement in the United States. The initial optimism, the act was driven by optimism about the potential for community-based care to improve the lives of individuals with mental illness. Challenges to implementation. While the act laid the groundwork for community mental health care, it faced challenges in full implementation and long-term funding, according to the National Journal of Psychiatry Residents Journals. Sorry about that. I live out surrounded in trees and lakes, and I don't know where that card came from. So it's continuing impact. The Act's legacy continues to shape the landscape of mental health care in the U.S., though challenges related to access, funding, and the need for robust community-based services remains. So I think that it's really important to feel, yeah, yes. Well, I felt bad. I felt bad for all of them, but definitely, um, such a shame though, because they were also dealing with now outdated understanding PTSD. Well, they didn't even use the post-traumatic stress disorder. That wasn't even a thing in the 60s. So yes, it was very hard, but I understand the desire by people to want the community, because honestly, this is one of the things that we're pushing as advocates against the troubled teen industry. So I don't want to sound like a hypocrite when I talk about this, because I'm not a hypocrite. Community-based programs and community-based services are ideal. They've had 62 years to do something about it. You know what's happened in 62 years? I'll tell you what's happened. So now we move to the closing of mental institutions during the 1970s and 80s. So we're going to look more detailed into deinstitutionalization. The movement aimed to move away from large, often isolated mental hospitals to smaller community-based facilities, group homes, smaller institutions, stuff like that. The idea was to provide more integrated and normalized care for individuals with mental illness. And we were starting to see some positive action moving towards that. I would say by the 1990s, you would see people who lived in community group homes. I just can only think group homes is the only term that I can think of right now, who were working jobs and living lives and then living on their own, but again, still being labeled, othered, treated poorly. So it was a really great idea, and I think that a lot of these things come from really good ideas. What happens is that greed, for lack of a better word, is good, according to Gordon Gekko in Wall Street. And that's who I think of when I think of that moment, is what I think of when I think about where we are in the United States at this moment right now. I feel like I'm back in like 1985. So the key factors driving the shift, changing public attitudes. There was growing criticism of the conditions in mental hospitals and a greater awareness of the rights of people with mental illness. Not a fan of Geraldo Rivera. However, he did do a report, and I apologize if somebody in the chat knows the name of the hospital. I've forgotten. Geraldo Rivera, back in the early 70s, did a report of a state-run mental hospital, I believe in New York, upstate New York, if I'm not mistaken. And it was abhorrent. It's still on YouTube. I suggest everybody that cares about this watches that, because this is what we're headed back to. So now, psychiatric drugs, the development and use of medications like antipsychotics allowed for more effective treatment of mental illness in community settings. And cost considerations. States sought to reduce the high costs associated with maintaining large institutions. I want you to pay attention to states sought to reduce the high costs associated with maintaining large institutions. And we're going to go into Reagan's role in this, because this did become a big thing in the 80s. Reagan's role in 1981, President Reagan signed the Omnibus Budget Reconciliation Act, which eliminated federal funding for community mental health centers. Just let that sink in immediately. It was like, no. The act shifted the responsibility for funding and providing mental health services to state and local governments. The president signed an act that shifted the responsibility for funding and providing mental health services to state and local governments. 1981. Check that off. While this act is seen as a contributing factor to the decline of institutionalization, it did not directly order the closure of mental hospitals. So anyone who thought that, it's not true. That's not what Reagan's act did. The Mental Health Systems Act of 1980, signed by President Carter, had previously provided federal funding for community mental health centers because it was important to President Carter. Reagan's action in repealing this act, along with a broader deinstitutionalization movement, resulted in a significant reduction in the number of patients in mental hospitals. President Reagan's lovely wife, Nancy, was the largest and most outspoken proponent of straight ink. By the way, still working, still acting, different name. We'll get into that in a future show. So the impact and consequences. The closure of mental hospitals and the shift to community care led to a substantial increase in the number of people with mental illness living in the community, often without adequate support or resources, a rise in homelessness among individuals with mental illness, increased pressure on families and communities to provide care, overcrowding in jails and prisons, which became de facto mental health institutions for many individuals. In conclusion, the 1980s saw a complex interplay of factors leading to the deinstitutionalization of mental health care. While Ronald Reagan's policies played a role, the movement was driven by broader social, medical, and economic forces. The 80s was all economic. If you ever hear the term yuppie or the me generation, that was the 80s. The 80s was all about money. It was and our president was the de facto king of New York as far as the yuppies went. So the consequences of this shift continue to be debated, with some arguing that it led to a neglect of individuals with severe mental illness, while others emphasize the importance of community-based care. Here's the issue. Neither of those things are wrong. So this debate, why are we debating things that are important? Neglecting individuals with severe mental illness and the importance of community-based care. Why would we argue that? Pennhurst, thank you. Thank you. I knew that I could count on somebody. Pennhurst Institution, check it out on YouTube. Geraldo Rivera does a horrific, splendid job showing horrific conditions that as a child, I couldn't even believe. Well, as a I was that's Generation X. Yep, we are the latchkey kids. My father, though, being a boomer, oddly enough, was a latchkey kid himself. He actually had to have his key pinned on his shirt. So he was I don't know, paved the way for us latchkey kids. You found another doc on Pennhurst, and there's the link. Okay, cool. So I remember in the 90s, in the 80s and the 90s, these large hospitals that loomed everywhere, they started to close down because, like I just read, you had people that were not in these large institutions anymore. So it was too expensive to fund and to pay the staff if there wasn't as many people institutionalized. So that led us to the majority of state-run mental hospitals closing down, the streets filling with individuals struggling with mental health issues and or drug issues. I have found that in my own research. Now, remember, when I talk about my own research, this is me talking face to face with people who are homeless. When I wasn't, but wanting to understand people. I consider myself an amateur social anthropologist. I love people. I'm fascinated by them. But when talking with people, mental illness gets worse when you're unhoused, homeless, having to navigate the system these days. It really does feel like the whole world is against you. So people who are suffering in their mental health issues, unable to find mental health care, medications, therapy, reality becomes skewed, and the ideal is to be numb. So they numb. And most people that I know of that are homeless, they don't have money to buy meth and coke and all the, I mean, granted, they can come up with $30 to get a pill, which is crazy. But um drugs have advanced, and this is my own personal. Hey Pooh, how are you, Pooh? It's good to see you. This is a personal opinion. I've watched the drug epidemic get worse since I've been alive. Heroin was very, and cocaine was very popular in the 70s. Then crack came along in the 80s. Yeah, I don't know. I'm a little irritated. I'm frustrated. I am a lot of the ids, but I woke up, I slept all night, and I am grateful for that. So drug abuse has gotten worse. So the 80s saw the arrival of rock cocaine and crack cocaine, and the difference between rock cocaine and crack cocaine. I guess I'm not supposed to talk about this stuff, but whatever. It's like baking soda or powder or something, and how they cook it. And we'd really never seen anything like the crack epidemic. And you just saw so many people becoming homeless, incarcerated. Yeah, I know. Thank you. I'm very, very proud. I guess there is a point where I can become exhausted enough that I can't stay awake. And then into the 90s, there was a shift back to heroin. If you remember the early 90s heroin chic look. I know that Calvin Klein used to push that for their advertisements, that they loved to show really skinny, emaciated people, and they called it heroin chic. Now, thank you. I was naturally just very thin myself, so I fell under that look, and I was like, well, I don't do that, and okay. So I have just seen the drugs getting worse, and more people not being alive anymore because of these drugs and ending up on the street. And as the people adapt to these drugs, suddenly a new drug that's worse than any drug that you've ever seen before shows up and starts killing people. They don't care if it kills homeless people. I'm just going to say that for a fact. You know what they care about? Suburban teenage girls who go down into the cities and buy drugs from somebody on the street. I am so sorry. I don't think that I ever knew that. And I send you my love and my sincerest condolences. I have lost several people I love to overdoses, and it's never fun. So, okay, now I have to switch. So yeah, everybody send your love to Pooh. I'm really sorry, love. So now we're going to talk about mental institutions now. Okay. And I know that I'm being lazy by doing the Gemini overview. I don't care if people have a problem with that, because all of this is backed up. So while large-scale public mental health institutions have largely become replaced by community-based care in America, mental health treatment is still available, though often in different forms and locations. Deinstitutionalization, a policy shift in the mid-20th century, led to the closure of many state mental hospitals. Today, mental health care is delivered through a variety of settings, including private psychiatric hospitals. Mark that one down on your bingo cards. General hospital psychiatric units, much smaller because they're just units. And they're also, majority of those are short stay. And community mental health centers and outpatient clinics. Okay, so we go from a country with a shit ton of mental hospitals all over, unruly, unregulated. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Sounds familiar to me. Just not regulated, no oversight, just lock those people away. We don't want anything, right? And then we bring them back, and what happens? They end up having breakdowns, their families give up on them, or their parents maybe pass away and they have nowhere to go, and they end up out on the streets, and either just suffering in their mental illness, or now having the co-existing conditions of mental health issues and drug abuse, and it's just getting worse and worse. And something I've noticed in the rhetoric through the years, because I've always paid attention, is how it started out as a people problem, and then it turned into the problem was the people. But then we also have people that choose van life and RV living and living in their cars, and they work jobs, they travel, they live lives, but they're also being criminalized because they're considered vagrant. So anyways, let's go back to the mental health institutions and care. So the key points about this in America today is shifting away from large asylums. So we don't have very many. There's a variety of settings, which we've gone through. Challenges in access and funding. Well, we just learned on the 24th of July that so then we have the continuing debate about deinstitutionalization, the effectiveness of deinstitutionalization, and the need for more structured care settings for some individuals remains a topic of ongoing discussion, which makes sense. It is something that should be debated, because I believe personally there could be a better balance, because you are going to have people that are going to need long-term care, but that care should be compassionate, and they shouldn't be stacked like cattle. And I just don't like to see that. And it just, yeah. So in conclusion, while large-scale state mental hospitals are largely gone, mental health care in America has evolved to encompass a wider range of services and settings. However, challenges remain in ensuring access and affordability for all who need it. First of all, affordability. Hey, Shannon. Hi, how are you? Affordability, pardon me, while I burst into flames. Yeah, I'm just quoting songs now. They can't afford anything, as they have no money unless they panhandle. And if they panhandle, they are criticized and looked down upon for doing that. I personally was never able to bring myself to panhandle. I guess, I don't know, it was my pride, my ego, a combination. It just never felt right. But I still, to this day, I don't judge people who do. Actually, always carry as many bottles of water as I possibly can in the summer and in the winter, socks, gloves, and blankets, because A, I have been homeless. B, I have worked with nonprofits that work with the homeless. So I understand these people and where they're coming from. It's, I don't know. It's just so just a few like little small things that I want to talk about, not show you necessarily. So like trying to figure out how many homeless people have criminal records because they're homeless. It's really hard to quantify the exact number of homeless individuals with criminal records due to a lack of comprehensive data and complexities of homelessness and criminal justice. So I couldn't get, I couldn't get statistics or analytics on this, no matter how hard I tried. I just couldn't get to this. So, okay. Now, I want to go back. I want to go back to the executive order and focus on section 2, restoring civil commitment. And I've pulled a thing up about civil commitment, and this is why I want to talk about it. The Attorney General, in consultation with the Secretary of Health and Human Services, shall take appropriate action to seek, in appropriate cases, the reversal of federal and state judicial precedents and the termination of consent decrees that impede the United States policy of encouraging civil commitment of individuals with mental illness who pose risks to themselves or the public or are living on the streets and cannot care for themselves in appropriate facilities for appropriate periods of time. 2, provide assistance to state and local governments through technical guidance, grants, or other legally available means for the identification, adoption, and implementation of maximal flexible civil commitment, institutional treatment, and step-down treatment standards that allow for the appropriate commitment and treatment of individuals with mental illness who pose a danger to others or are living on the streets and cannot care for themselves. I would very much like to point out that there are, hello, Kazi. Thanks for being here. There are actually a decent number of homeless people who can take care of themselves. They just don't have a home. They have jobs, pets, and they do everything that they can to get affordable housing. However, affordable housing in the United States is a joke. It's an absolute joke. So I want to go into, where are you? Pardon my quiet. Civil commitment. I want to go into what we're talking about when they say the acute necessity of civil commitment. Civil commitment or involuntary commitment is a legal process by which individuals experiencing severe mental illness pose a risk to themselves or others, or demonstrating grave disability, inability to care for basic needs due to mental illness. So that is how the demonstrating grave disability is the term that was twisted into not being able to care for themselves because they are unhoused. Right there. So then these people are admitted to a psychiatric facility for treatment against their will. While it presents a tension between individual liberty and the state's interest in protecting its citizens and provided care, it is deemed acutely necessary in certain circumstances for the following reasons. Give me 1 second. Okay, sorry. So protecting individuals and others from harm. In cases of severe mental illness, individuals may experience symptoms that impair their judgment and lead to behavior that poses a significant risk of physical harm to themselves. You notice how that's what comes first. That's what we should be caring about first. Is it if they're a harm to themselves? And you see that, or themselves or to others. Civil commitment provides a legal framework to intervene and ensure these individuals receive treatment in the least restrictive setting possible to prevent such harm. Providing life-saving treatment when voluntary engagement is not possible. Addressing the needs of vulnerable populations. Individuals experiencing homelessness and severe mental illness are particularly vulnerable and may benefit significantly from civil commitment to access the treatment they need to survive and improve their overall well-being. Civil commitment can be crucial for individuals who might not have access to mental health otherwise due to factors like lack of insurance or available facilities. Okay, short-term intervention and stabilization. So that's where your mental health units within hospitals would come in. Short-term. They also do have short-term institutions, I guess you could call them. They're much smaller scale. Balancing liberty and well-being. This is really important because this is what I'm not seeing in this executive order. Civil commitment laws and procedures are designed to strike a balance between individual rights and the need for intervention in certain situations, not a large swath of people. Okay. It's just not how it works. Legal safeguards such as due process, the right to counsel, and judicial oversight are in place to ensure fair treatment and protection and protect individuals' autonomy as much as possible. In essence, civil commitment, while a measure of last resort, is acutely necessary to address severe mental health crisis where individuals' well-being and or the safety of others are at imminent risk and voluntary engagement in treatment is not possible. The process aims to provide life-saving treatments and support while upholding legal and ethical principles of patient rights and individualized care. I don't disagree with anything that says that. Yeah, this is what I want. I wanted to bring this up. So thank you for saying this. There's a housing crisis here in Australia too. It's the worst it's been in recorded history. It's not illegal to be homeless here, though, at least. Now, this is a worldwide problem. Homelessness is not a uniquely American situation. This is a worldwide, we'll just call it a pandemic, right? Because it's worldwide. And when something is an epidemic, it's just here. When it's pandemic, it's everywhere. So that was why I felt it important I wanted to read that. Okay. A lot of this too, for me, is language. I know that we have a president who does like to speak aggressively and whatever, his tough guy persona thing. If that makes him feel better, then cool for him. However, I do believe that it doesn't look great. So now we're going to go to section 3, fighting vagrancy on American streets. Now, what does that sound like to you all? I'm curious. Fighting vagrancy. So it's a war on the homeless people, right? Just asking questions here. So the Attorney General, the Secretary of Health and Human Services, and the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, and the Secretary of Transportation shall take immediate steps to assess their discretionary grant programs and determine whether priority for those grants may be given to grantees in states and municipalities that actively meet the below criteria to the maximum extent permitted by law. Enforce prohibitions on open illicit drug use. That's fine. I know that we have advocates who wanted to criminalize all drugs and those who don't want that. But yeah, I don't see an issue with, there continuing to be a prohibition of people openly using drugs on the street. And by on the street, I literally mean like sitting on a street surrounded by people like that I do agree with that. Enforce prohibitions on urban camping and loitering. I do not agree with that. Enforce prohibitions on urban squatting. Also don't believe in that. Enforce and, where necessary, adopt standards that address individuals who are a danger to themselves or others and suffer from serious mental illness or substance use disorder, or who are living on the streets and cannot care for themselves. Now, that's what we just talked about, is the language change. So those who are living on the streets cannot care for themselves now, just so you know. Through assisted outpatient treatment or by moving them into treatment centers or other appropriate facilities via civil commitment or other available means, like jails and prison, to the maximum extent permitted by law. Or, what is this or? This gets into a little bit of a gray area because I'm still trying to understand and come to terms with this next statement, because as it reads, I don't disagree with this. Substantially implement and comply with, to the extent required, the registration and notification obligations of the Sex Offender Registry and Notification Act. It's ironic, really. Particularly in the case of registered sex offenders with no fixed address, including by adequately mapping and checking the locations of homeless sex offenders. The Attorney General shall ensure that homeless individuals arrested for federal crimes are evaluated consistent with 18 USC 4248 to determine whether they are sexually dangerous persons and certified accordingly for civil commitment. Take all necessary steps to ensure the availability of funds under the Emergency Federal Law Enforcement Assistance Program to support, as consistent with 34 USC 50101, at sequence encampment removal efforts in areas for which public safety is at risk and state and local resources are inadequate. So who decides if the state and local resources are inadequate? The Attorney General? Do we trust the Attorney General to do that? Also, how are these people being triaged? Because if you're sending police in there, police are absolutely not equipped to triage homeless people and figure out what their most immediate needs are. So where's the plan? And as far as the sex offenders, I don't have a problem with excluding sex offenders from care. I want to see if it's in here. Okay, hang on. Yeah, I think it might be. Assess federal resources to determine whether they may be directed towards ensuring to the extent permitted by law that detainees with serious mental illness are not released into the public because of a lack of forensic bed capacity at appropriate local, state, and federal jails or hospitals. But before we move on to that, I don't believe that people who are with serious mental health issues should be held in prison or jail. I just don't. If their main, with a caveat, if their propensity is to unalive people or to SA people, that's a completely different thing. But if we can have federal prisons protecting sex offenders from the general population and prison justice, I just don't understand. Okay. Enhance requirements that prisons and residential reentry centers, like halfway houses, they would call them, that are under the authority of the Attorney General or receive funding from the Attorney General, requires in custody housing release plans, and to the maximum extent practicable, require individuals to comply. Okay, so how are we feeling? Yes. Yeah. The rise against instead of helping them. I don't think that we should revoke people's access to care either. Yeah, they do. They absolutely do. There's an argument in this executive order, however, stating that those on the sex offender registry shouldn't be housed with kids. And I can say that as far as if they're talking about men, they're not housed with kids. In most cities that I've been to, and I've been to almost every city in America, I'm talking like city, not every city. That's crazy. I mean, it'd be amazing to have actually literally gone everywhere in America, but I haven't. But in the cities, the men are housed in one facility. Women and children are housed in separate facilities. So, this is important. Police have needed help in identifying disabled, confused, and scared people versus violent, dangerous individuals. Yeah, they need a lot of help deciphering between people who are in a mental health crisis and people who pose a threat to others, because they're not interchangeable. So that was the part about the sex offenders, which I don't want to deny them care. It was an unnecessary added fear factor as far as I can tell. Redirecting federal resources toward effective methods of addressing homelessness. The Secretary of Health and Human Services, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., shall take appropriate action to ensure that discretionary grants issued by the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration for Substance Use Disorder Prevention, Treatment, and Recovery Fund, evidence-based programs and do not fund programs that fail to achieve adequate outcomes, including so-called harm reduction or safe consumption efforts that only facilitate illegal drug use and its attendant harm. I just did that because I use this for harm reduction. So basically, they are now coming out publicly, our federal administration is coming out publicly against harm reduction and safe consumption efforts. Provide technical assistance to assisted outpatient treatment programs for individuals with serious mental illness or addiction during and after the civil commitment process, focused on shifting such individuals off the streets and public programs and into private housing and support networks. See, this language is so vague. That's what frightens me about it, is the vagueness. So then they also want to ensure that federal funds for federal qualified health centers and certified community behavioral health clinics reduce rather than promote homelessness by supporting to the maximum extent permitted by law comprehensive services for individuals with serious mental illnesses and substance use disorder, including crisis intervention services. The Attorney General shall prioritize available funding to support the expansion of drug courts and mental health courts for individuals for which such diversion serves public safety, which is great. Drug court and mental health courts are actually a good thing. The problem with them is what happens after. You know, they came up with the idea of drug court and mental health court for a reason. And then they were just kind of like, okay, cool. But there's no follow-up. Yeah. Police are not mental health specialists. And that was something that I believe came to light. I mean, it was always out in the light, but was really people started talking about and focusing on it since 2020 and the protests after George Floyd was unalived, live on camera for everybody. See, and it does, yes. Well, she's got a lot of money, and I believe that was, well, because I believe that what's her name, Amanda Bynes, I believe that her parents might have done a conservatorship too. I don't know how far-reaching conservatorship and guardianship is for people, because, and I do believe that Britney Spears was put in a conservatorship so her family could bilk her loot. I absolutely do believe that. However, a lot of what I've seen of Britney Spears since the release of her, from being released from her conservatorship, is a very unstable woman, and that I have concerns for. But she's not in my life, so I have concern from afar. You know, hang on. Geez, I think I spent 58 minutes without not talking. That was crazy. So increasing accountability and safety in America's homelessness programs. So basically what this is kind of attacking nonprofits. Okay. The Secretary of Health and Human Services and the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development shall take appropriate actions to increase accountability in their provision of and grant awards for homelessness assistance and transitional living programs. Now, I have benefited myself from homelessness assistance and transitional living programs. But the transitional living programs need a lot of work. I'm just going to put that out there. These actions shall include, to the extent permitted by law, ending support for housing first policies that deprioritize accountability and fail to promote treatment, recovery, and self-sufficiency, increasing competition among grantees through broadening the applicant pool, and holding grantees to higher standards of effectiveness in reducing homelessness and increasing public safety. Okay, so this one here for me is, this would be their anti-DEI for those who are homeless. So what they're saying is that those who prove themselves most worthy are going to get assistance. But I think that those who are the most motivated are the ones that are, I don't know, that it's just, again, like I said, for me, a lot of it is language. A lot of this is language and the language. So I want to do a couple more things because unfortunately we're running out of time. Yeah, no, listen, I agree. In defense of police, they are not given proper mental health support for the crisis they see on a daily basis. Right. So they don't receive enough mental health themselves, and they also are not necessarily adequately equipped to work with people in mental health crisis, because we see this every day. Somebody having a mental health crisis sitting in the middle of a street and not moving because they're too afraid shouldn't be pew-pewed. They should be treated and spoken to and understood and looked after. That I just brought up an incident where a nonverbal autistic young man was pew-pewed by the popo. That's oh my God, I don't even sound cool when I try to sound cool. I'm not trying to sound cool. So now, are there enough resources? What do you guys think? Are there enough institutions? So the answer obviously is no. There are not enough institutions or resources to accommodate all individuals experiencing homelessness who might be targeted by Ending Crime and Disorder on America's Streets initiative. This initiative, proposed by President Trump, aims to address homelessness by moving individuals from the streets into treatment and potentially involuntary civil commitment. But the existing infrastructure lacks the capacity for such a large-scale effort. Furthermore, there is a critical shortage of affordable housing and supportive services needed to address the root cause of homelessness. Homelessness is a symptom. Homelessness is a symptom. Homelessness is a symptom. It's not the issue, it's a symptom. I think I might have said that enough. Okay, to elaborate, the executive order, which we already know the title of, focuses on a strategy that includes clearing encampments, providing treatment, and potentially using civil commitment for those deemed a risk to themselves or others. By who, it's not said. In what way, it's not said. While the order acknowledges the need for mental health and addiction treatment, it also prioritizes a shift away from housing first approaches toward programs requiring sobriety and treatment. Okay, so this approach faces several significant challenges: a lack of capacity, obviously, limited affordable housing, or legislation asking and calling for a certain amount of affordable housing in every major city in the country. Potential for harm, criminalizing homelessness and pushing individuals into treatment, especially involuntary commitment, could have negative consequences and may not be the most effective or humane approach. Hi, have we met? It didn't work for me when I was 14 years old. So focus on enforcement over prevention. So this is a problem. We want to prevent it. We don't want to enforce and criminalize it. But yeah, so again, more effective and compassionate approaches would be expanding affordable housing, strengthening prevention programs, prioritizing voluntary treatment, addressing systemic issues. All very important things. And okay, no, get rid of that one. So where's the one? Okay, I want to show just real quick. I want to show the benefits. Now, the benefits, because I want to be fair, it is important to note that the effectiveness and benefits of the executive order are a subject of ongoing debate and controversy because it was just passed 8 days ago. So we don't know. Right now, we are in kind of the fear-mongering and diversion portion of, oh my gosh, is this going to happen? Don't look over here. But look at this, and how scary is this? And we don't know. But considering how quickly, I don't even like to say this because it's embarrassing that they name things like this, but with how quickly alligator Alcatraz went up, I have no doubt that the federal government could put up a bunch of places like this for homeless individuals. And that is one of the reasons that I'm speaking out. But I want to talk about potential benefits as outlined by the order and its proponents. Reduced crime and disorder, not fully factual, but we'll take that. The order aims to address public safety concerns by prioritizing federal resources for state and municipalities that enforce prohibitions on open illicit drug use, urban camping, and other activities deemed as contributing to crime and disorder. Improved public health outcomes. The order seeks to redirect funding toward treatment centers and assisted outpatient treatment for individuals experiencing homelessness, serious mental illness, or substance use disorders, with the aim of addressing those underlying issues. I want to say something really quick because I can't help it. I'm thinking about when they were talking about outpatient treatment for individuals experiencing homelessness. I happen to know that there's a really great program called Room at the Inn in Nashville. And it is in downtown Nashville, actually right around the corner from Third Man Records, as well as the Nashville Rescue Mission for Men. And it's a really, really valuable resource. I think every city should have one. So if that's what they're talking about, absolutely, they should take that model from Room at the Inn in Nashville, Tennessee, and expand it around the country. Cool. That would help a lot of people. It got me into a DV shelter. So I had to take showers and do laundry, make phone calls, go on the computer, have lunch. Plenty of resources, somewhere to go when it's too hot, somewhere to go when it's too cold during the day. Not at night, but during the day at least. Okay. Improved public health outcomes. The order seeks to redirect funding towards treatment centers. Oh, I already read that one. Sorry. Increased access to treatment by focusing on treatment and diverting individuals away from illicit drug use and harmful behaviors. The order intends to help individuals access necessary care and support, according to the White House. That's according to the White House. By addressing crime or safer communities, by addressing crime and disorder, the order envisions creating safer cities and towns for all citizens. Utopias. Enhanced support for law enforcement. The order may empower state and local law enforcement by providing new best practices, expanding training, access, and increasing legal protections. So, critiques and concerns. And I have forced institutionalizations. Critics argue the EO prioritizes involuntarily committing individuals with mental illness and substance use disorders, reminiscent of outdated practices that led to abuse and neglect in the first place. You know, the full circle we seem to be doing in every one of our tendrils around the country and around the world. It's like we're going in a circle back to try things again that didn't work the first time. So I don't know what makes anybody think it's going to work again. But, you know, I'm just an idiot with an 8th grade education who sits at home and talks on my computer to nobody. What do I know? Criminalization of homelessness and mental illness. Critics argue that the orders focus on enforcing laws against urban camping, loitering, squatting, criminalizes individuals experiencing homelessness and mental illness without addressing the root cause of these conditions. Ineffectiveness of punitive measures. Many argue that punitive approaches like arrests and forced institutionalization are ineffective in addressing mental illness and addiction, which are complex public health issues requiring comprehensive community-based solutions, notes Mental Health America. Erosion of civil liberties, which is so incredibly important because they're quietly being stripped away while no one's paying attention. Concerns exist about the potential for the order to erode civil liberties, particularly for individuals with mental health disabilities and those experiencing homelessness, by encouraging involuntary commitment and institutionalization. Lack of focus on root causes, trauma, basically. The order has been criticized for addressing only superficial issues without examining or addressing the deeper root causes of homelessness, mental health crises, and crime, such as lack of affordable housing and economic opportunities, as well as education and a general sense of being supported. I added that myself. In conclusion, while the stated goal of the executive order is to enhance public safety and address crime and disorder on the streets, its approach and potential benefits are a subject of considerable debate, with advocates citing a focus on treatment and critics raising concerns about the criminalization of vulnerable populations and the rejection of evidence-based strategies. And that is really all I can cover right now, because this continues. Yeah, no, you know what? I'm just going to read the rest of it because it's unfair of me, I feel, to gloss over this. So I'm just going to read the rest of this EO so that we understand, and then we could speak more on it at a later time. So Section 4, redirecting federal resources toward effective methods of housing, methods of addressing homelessness. The Secretary of Health and Human Services shall take appropriate action to ensure that discretionary grants issued by the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration for substance use disorder prevention, treatment, and recovery fund evidence-based programs and do not fund programs that fail to achieve adequate outcomes, including so-called harm reduction and safe consumption efforts that only facilitate illegal drug use and its attendant harm. Provide technical assistance to assisted outpatient treatment programs for individuals with serious mental illness or addiction during and after the civil commitment process, focusing on shifting such individuals off of the streets and public programs and into private housing and support networks, which, oh, yeah, I read that and I didn't understand what private housing is affordable for people coming out of homelessness. It's a good question. To ensure that federal funds for federally qualified health centers and certified community behavioral health clinics reduce rather than promote homelessness by supporting, to the maximum extent permitted by law, comprehensive services for individuals with serious mental illness and substance use disorder, including crisis intervention services. By whom, you might ask? The Attorney General shall prioritize available funding to support the expansion of drug courts and mental health courts for individuals for which such diversion serves public safety. Section 5, increasing accountability and safety in America's homelessness program. The Secretary of Health and Human Services and the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development shall take appropriate actions to increase availability in their provision of and grants awarded for homelessness assistance and transitional living. I read this. The Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, as appropriate, takes steps to require recipients of federal housing and homelessness assistance to increase requirements that persons participating in the recipient's program who suffer from substance use disorder or serious mental health issues use substance abuse treatment or mental health services as a condition of participation. I don't think it should be a punishment. And it reads like a punishment. With respect to recipients of federal housing and homelessness assistance that operate drug injection sites or safe consumption sites, knowingly distribute drug paraphernalia, or permit the use or distribution of illicit drugs on property under their control. The Attorney General shall review whether such recipients are in violation of federal law, including 21 U.S.C. 856, and bring civil or criminal actions in appropriate cases, and the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, in coordination with the Attorney General, shall review whether such recipients are in violation of the terms of the programs pursuant to which they receive federal housing and homelessness assistance and freeze their assistance as appropriate. The Secretary of Housing and Urban Development shall take appropriate measures and revise regulations as necessary to allow, where permissible under applicable law, federally funded programs to exclusively house women and children, and to stop sex offenders who receive homelessness assistance through such programs from being housed with unrelated children. They're not. There may be places somewhere where that happens, but not on my radar. And I wouldn't call myself a professional but I'm an advocate and I know quite a bit. But again, it's just kind of jibber jabber to me. The Secretary of Housing and Urban Development in consultation with the Attorney General and the Secretary of Health and Human Services shall, as appropriate and to the extent permitted by law, allow or require the recipients of federal funding for homelessness assistance to collect health-related information that the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development identifies as necessary to the effective and efficient operation of the funding program from all persons to whom such assistance is provided, and require those funding recipients to share such data with law enforcement authorities in circumstances permitted by law, to use the collected health data to provide appropriate medical care to individuals with mental health diagnoses or to connect individuals to public resources. Wow. Section 6, general provisions. Nothing in this order shall be construed to impair or otherwise affect the authority granted by law to an executive department or agency or the head thereof, or the functions of the director of the Office of Management and Budget relating to budgetary, administrative, or legislative proposals. Oh, this is all the butt covering. This order shall be implemented consistent with applicable law and subject to the availability of appropriations, which, by the way, the applicable laws, this is overriding state and local laws. So this order is not intended to and does not create any right or benefit, substantive or procedural, enforceable at law or in equity by any party against the United States, its departments, agencies, or entities, its officers, employees, or agents, or any other person. The cost for publication of this order shall be borne by the Department of Housing and Urban Development. So the publication of this order was paid for by the Department of Housing and Urban Development. You're welcome. Thank you, I guess. So, hey, Kimbe, good to see you. So yeah, there was some shaky kind of, and I just want to point out too that there is, and I can actually put this, I just want to show people really quick that there is a fact sheet at whitehouse.gov that I did want to go over today, but I went over. I went over in time. So it's important to know that there is a fact sheet for this. But the language can be frightening. And I want to kind of, did it show up on YouTube or no? Hang on one second. Hang on a second. I'm sorry about that. No, I want this fact sheet. Oh, great. Now, did I lose it? There we go. Copy. I want to paste this into the chat. So everybody give me a little grace here. Oh, shoot. I'm under the wrong. Dang it. You know, this is where the people that complain about me being disorganized and scattered kind of really get to me, but I'm going to just try to ignore that. But so what this feels like to me is a threat to the states by the president to get people off the streets. Forced institutionalization again, and nothing. I read the entire order, right? Nothing in that order speaks about the 1 in 30 children in America that are unhoused. So what happens to them? I'll give you a good guess. Everybody, we're going to say everybody 10 and under. I bet you they go to family members or foster care. Okay. We could stretch that to 12 and under. You know what's going to happen to the adolescents and the teens? It doesn't say it, and this is just a hunch from a survivor, so it's a little sensitive of a topic for me, but I believe that those children will be sent to troubled teen industry programs around the country. And the reason that I believe that is there's no language out there to prove otherwise. So again, I'm only assuming this is my opinion. Everything I say is my opinion. Just because I'm reading things, I'm only giving my opinions on it. And I'm not giving an opinion on the presidents or any of the secretaries or the attorney generals or governors, mayors, whatever, law enforcement. I have my personal beliefs about all of that. That has nothing to do with this. This is a serious issue because it demonizes and criminalizes people who are homeless and living with substance abuse and mental health issues due to trauma. So if we're not working on the core, which is trauma, sorry, I don't know where that came from. We're just going to continue to see this. So trauma from people who go and fight in foreign wars, trauma for people with very difficult and abusive childhoods. And that could, be a whole host of reasons. The core issues are what needs to be dealt with. And this has been said over and over and over again. So this is just all a bunch of political mumbo jumbo as far as I'm concerned. But what it's doing is it's pointing, this executive order appears to be pointing at the states and saying, do something about this, or we are. And then we're just going to pop up a bunch of places that are either drug treatment centers or mental health institutions. And we're just going to put homeless people against their will in these places until such time as we see fit to transition them out into the world. Again, the police they're not equipped for this, right? Well, and this part, exactly. Foster care in itself is already problematic. And a lot of kids in the foster care system end up in troubled teen industry programs, as well as children who are sent to juvenile detention centers also are in and out of troubled teen industry programs. So all I'm really seeing is that this executive order is turning homeless people into troubled teens and sending them away against their will. And my personal take from everything, it's more fear mongering and division and a diversion as well. I haven't seen enough division discussed about this particular issue lately to speak on it, but believe me, I will be paying attention because I'm so concerned about what's not being talked about, and that is the kids. Where are the kids going to go? 1 in 30 children in America are homeless. Let that sink in. All right, I'm going to wrap it up. I want to thank everybody. I apologize for not being as active in the chat as I usually am. This is something that's very important to me. I want to thank everybody who participated in the live chat. I appreciate all of you. You are my friends, and you mean a whole lot to me. Every single one of you. Thank you for showing up for me. And for everybody who watches this later, thank you. Feel free to like or dislike, subscribe, don't subscribe, leave a comment. Nice, negative, I'm okay with it. Constructive criticism, I'm good with that. If it's nasty, I'm gonna leave it there just so that can stay there, but I won't respond to you. So everybody take care of yourselves the best that you can. Do something nice for yourself today. I'm going to do something nice for myself when I get done with this. And be kind to someone today. And keep doing it every day. And maybe, if we're lucky, we can make the world a better place. Bye for now. Happy Friday.